Hi, welcome to Sustain Talks. Today I'm joined by Gavin Tweedie. He is the founder and chief impact officer at Net Zero Nation, who are on a mission to enable the SME community and next generation to power the net zero transition. Gavin, it's good to have you here. How are you?
I'm great, Sam. Thanks for asking, and it's great to meet you and be here with you today and share some insights with the group and the audience.
Yeah, well, why don't we start with you, Taylor? That was a very short introduction, but it'd be good to hear from you. What is Net Zero Nation? What are you trying to do?
Cool. Well, so Net Zero Nation is a social enterprise that we formed back in 2021, if you like, in response to COP26 in Glasgow. We felt that the SME community needed a voice be heard, so that COP26 wasn't kind of an exclusive event with those in the deepest pockets. And we formed this community, which today has around 1,600 members from around the United Kingdom. And we ended up taking about 80 companies to COP26 to share their inspiring stories about their net zero journeys. And from there, we decided to create something called a Net Zero Accelerator programme. And that was designed to kind of give the SME community an on-ramp to net zero. So they don't know where to begin their journey, and we'll talk about this later this morning. So it was really about giving those businesses a chance to start with net zero, but not do it on their own, but do it as part of a guided journey alongside other businesses. So the purpose is to mass mobilise the SME community. We have in Scotland, 364,000 SMEs that need to be mobilised. That's a big task that's ahead of us. Many of them don't have the resources or the time or even the motivation to do it. So we'll be tackling that through the accelerator programmes that we're running nationally just now, and I'll share more of that information with you.
Yeah, great. For everybody that doesn't know, and you know, for me and you, we talk about this every day, but can you explain exactly what net zero is?
It's, do you know, you're right, that it can be confusing, especially if you look at this through the lens of a business who, you know, some people say we're going to be carbon neutral by 2030. And other people say I'm going to be carbon neutral by 2050. I'm going to be net zero by 2025. And you hear all these different terms and timeframes. And for me, the first thing is kind of debunking the myths, as it were. So carbon neutral is something that people have spoken about for a long time. Is when a business will essentially offset the footprint that it creates by buying offsets. And that's fine. Whereas net zero is actually about doing everything that's humanly possible to reduce your emissions and only offsetting the remainder. So for me, you need both methods, right? One, we actively need to reduce the amount of emissions that we're creating now. There's already too much greenhouse gas up there in the atmosphere. The planet's heating up because of what's already there. So it doesn't make sense to keep adding any more to it unless we absolutely have to. But at the same time, we need to remove it from the atmosphere. So the offset programs that exist to sequester that carbon are equally important. So we need a strategy that takes advantage of doing everything in your power to reduce your emissions, to not make things any worse, whilst also investing in programs that can remove that. So we talk about building emission removal capacity. So businesses should have a net zero plan that sets out to maximise their emission reduction campaign, and then look at how they can invest in nature to support that regeneration.
Yeah, I had a really interesting conversation. We was training with a company the other day, and people were saying, can you actually get to net zero? How do you know, it's not just the flick of a switch and you stop selling what you sell. So can everyone get to net zero? Is it really possible?
It's a great question, and I think that, you know, that's why the targets are set out over 5 or 10 years. There is this transition that businesses have to go on, and it's about the culture of your organisation as much as it's about the emissions that you generate. You need to bring your whole business on the journey with you. You need to engage every department, and you can get to be a low carbon operation. The technologies don't exist for mainstream society yet to exploit to be a fully net zero business, but certainly there are actions and steps that we can take to massively lower the footprint that we're creating, and we can start to adapt and adopt the technologies that will get us to net zero. So I think, you know, absolute net zero right now is going to be really, really difficult, but certainly moving to low carbon operations is plausible, and many businesses are already doing it.
Yeah. Why SMEs? Like, often people say, you know, I'm a small business, I'm not going to have that much effect. I mean, you said that there's over 360,000 businesses in Scotland, but why do they need to get on board with net zero?
Well, you know, it's such a great question, and I think we have to bring the point home that we're all inhabitants of Earth, right? And air pollution is caused by emissions. So essentially, if you want to create cleaner air for your local community, do everything in your power to reduce the emissions that you create locally. It's not just about, oh, well, you know, these big nations in other part of the world are creating emissions. We're creating emissions here. We can reduce the emissions here, will make a difference in air quality. But from an SME standpoint, in Scotland, the 364,000 SMEs generate 42% of Scotland's emissions. That's according to economic input-output models from the Scottish Government. It could be more, it could be less. That's just what's based on the economic models. Right now, we're not really measuring in most cases. And if you're not measuring something, you can't manage it. Someone said something to me this morning about, you know, if you were in a boat and it was sinking, would you say it's someone else's problem? And that's the question you've got to, every SME has to ask themselves. You know, every one of us can do something, but beyond, you know, the planetary impact that you're trying to create, you won't win contracts in the future, and you won't protect the contracts that you've got. We are seeing businesses all the time coming to us to say, we're trying to bid on a contract and it's asking me for a net zero plan, and I don't have one. How do I get one of these? Because I don't have anyone in my business who has the expertise, plus I'm too busy doing what I'm doing. So essentially, businesses need to have a net zero strategy that's credible to continue to trade, to attract the workforce of the future to join them, to seek investment, to get grants, to get loans. Everything's going to come back to having a credible net zero strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. But it is a challenge to get there. What are the things that they can, any business, what kind of things, where do they start? What's the beginning of that?
Well, you know, that's, for me, I don't think SMEs should try and do this by themselves. So that's one of the reasons we founded the community, as it were. So for us at Net Zero Nation, we bring groups of businesses together in an area or in a vertical. And together, they share in the journey. Now, they might arrive at the destination at a different point, but the main thing is they share in the learning. So it's collective commitment on personal journeys, if that makes sense. So what these businesses can do is start by saying, well, we need to measure, we need to get a baseline. So I would say SMEs seek out a group or a community or someone running a program similar to ours, where a number of businesses share the purpose to get the baseline in place and do peer review. So as you create your reduction plan, share it with the other businesses around you and say, well, what do you think about this? And they're going to say, well, we tried that didn't work for us. Or, you know what? That worked really well for us. And here's an excellent recommendation from someone who helped us to do that. So that power of community is a way of helping a business get to where they need to be. And in so doing, they'll get group buying power. So what we're saying are 5 or 6 businesses saying, let's work out, if we all need solar panels, why don't we get together and order 100 instead of buying 5? So we can reduce the cost of net zero if we adopt a group buying power approach. And that's why community approaches are the best ways to tackle net zero.
Yeah, that collaboration, it you know, it's going to help so many businesses. And as you say, they often don't have the people in their teams, or, you know, if you're a small business, you might not have somebody that's going to be able to take that role on. So joining together, I think that that community essence of it is just perfect. Do you think that with businesses, you mentioned about winning contracts and winning tenders and things like that. Do you think that there are other benefits to businesses in becoming net zero?
You know, one of the things when we run these accelerator programs, first thing we do is we ask businesses, what's important to you? And what we hear is our brand, growth, profit, recruitment. They tell us these are the things that we're most interested in. Net zero touches on all of those things. So first of all, if your brand's important, you have an opportunity for your brand to stand out. You've got a credible net zero strategy. That's something that you can be proud about. That's going to attract people towards you. If you're focused on recruitment, well, where's your workforce coming from? And do you have a culture today that people want to be part of? Does your culture speak for a company that cares about the right things? Do your values speak to your culture and your workforce? And are you going to attract the workforce of the future to join you because you've got the right people and planet positive values? So as we go forward, more customers now evaluate you on the way that you do things as much as the product that you're selling. And that's a big pivot point, because we've come from a society which measured success purely on profit alone and nothing else. More and more, we're now measured on, well, yeah, well, what's your people and planet positive strategy?
Yeah, we see that. I see that so much from the businesses that I work with, where, you know, they're attracting talent because people want to go to work in a company where they can see their values. And, you know, times are changing and you want to work for a company that you can see is doing good. And that net zero, I think, fits into that. Do you think that businesses are going to have to transition? You mentioned earlier about transitioning, and that, you know, we've got what 27 years to get there, supposedly. I actually think it's much sooner than that. But if you're a business, say for example, you sell travel, obviously travel emits emissions. So would that business have to completely transition the way that they do things and what they sell?
You know, it's a great question. And I think, you know, the business world has to continuously innovate to stay ahead. You've got to always be at the frontier of this. You sit back and rest on your laurels. Eventually, someone's going to come and eat your lunch. Nothing, the only constant thing is things change, right? So a good example of that is safety. If we went back 50 years and we looked at certain industries like construction, perhaps there wasn't the same focus on safety. And, you know, people became more and more aware and more concerned about it. And now safety is a culture that's pervasive across an industry and actually spans every department of a company, whether it's sales, marketing, finance, or operations. You know, safety cuts horizontally across those business pillars. Now, sustainability and social value are going in the same way. So if you can put those values horizontally across your business, then actually the transition that you're talking about becomes more natural. Whereas if you just try and kind of retrofit, now I'm going to try and adapt my product line to be sustainable, you'll fail. You've got to get your values sorted out and your culture sorted out and get everyone bought into what the mission. And then, as I think, everything will fall naturally into place. But culture really will drive this. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that, you know, businesses that are driven on profit, and we see it in the news all the time, especially with the oil and gas companies and the banks, and, you know, people are turning away from those organizations. They don't want to bank with banks that are making millions and millions in profit because they're really struggling right now. What do you think would happen if people don't get on board with net zero, and especially if SMEs don't get on board with this?
Yeah, I think for the companies that view this as a cost and an interruption and a distraction, are ultimately going to find that customers stop buying from them. If not today, then in the near future. Recently, a cleaning firm, I became aware of a story of a business that was cleaning a call centre's offices, and they were asked to provide transparency into the cleaning products and the net zero strategy. And the company had been cleaning this office for years, and they thought, well, they didn't take the request seriously. And after 3 months, their customer said, look, you've not provided us with the information we need. We've made this commitment within our ESG strategy to provide this transparency, so we're letting you go. And they were dismissed. And so on the one hand, the loser there was the company that didn't embrace sustainability. The winner was the company that did provide the transparency. So the way to look at this is there's always winners and losers. So you've got to ask yourself, are you a winning business or a losing business? Because this is what's going to underpin your future strategy.
Yeah, and it's going to affect everyone. And I think actually there's also a bit of a lesson there for the larger company, that they should be taking their SMEs on that journey as well and helping them.
Yeah.
And rather than saying, look, we're not going to work with you anymore because we worked with you for all these years and your service has been impeccable. We want to help you, and we want to help you take you on that journey as well. And I think that's also a bit of a job for the enterprises, that they have to recognise that there are going to be SMEs out there that don't know what net zero is, and they need to be able to guide them and set them up with organisations like yourselves, like Net Zero Nation, that can say, look, we're working with this organisation, they'll help you on your journey. If not, then we're not going to be able to work with you, rather than saying
absolutely. I think the last thing we want is the SME community to fall off a cliff.
Yeah.
But something's got to change. We can't bury our head in the sand any longer with this. I think what we're seeing is the large businesses, they don't have the resources to decarbonise their supply chains, nor is it their core business. So they're going to have to seek out partners that they can collaborate with to mass mobilise. And again, you know, we're talking about some companies that have got like 1,000, 2,000 suppliers, and they're divided into tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3. They need to bring all those businesses on the journey with them. So finding partners that have created mass mobilisation programmes, and I think there isn't any one answer and there isn't any one partner. The scale of the task ahead of us is just too damn big for any one organisation and any one strategy. So if there's one piece of advice I could give for people out there looking at this, is I would say, look, identify a number of partners that you can work with to target your tier 1, your tier 2 and your tier 3 supply chains, and then monitor the progress and invest more in the programmes that are creating the genuine impact, where you're getting great feedback from the SME community. What you're going to do there is create the social value that you're, as a big business now, measured on. So when you're going out to measure your really big contracts, you've got to demonstrate sustainability and social value. So by helping those tier 2 and tier 3 suppliers, you're contributing in a way that's credible. And in an era of greenwashing, to be able to stand up and say, we actively helped our SME community transition, well, that's going to win you contracts.
Yeah. Yeah. It's such, when you were talking then, and I sometimes forget because I'm having these conversations all the time, it's such a big job to get everyone on board. And I find it interesting when we go into companies and we deliver training, and you know, we start by asking what sustainability means to them, and you know, if they heard the terms ESG or net zero or carbon neutral or whatever, and they haven't. And you know, often it's a younger generation that we might be speaking to, and it's you have to engage everybody within your business to understand this if you're going on that journey. It can't just be the CEO. but how do you think that we engage that next generation? Because to them, they might not be seeing what's going on in the world. They might not be seeing that to win this tender, we have to have an ESG strategy. So how do we engage them in this?
I think that's a great question. I've been fortunate to work within another social enterprise for the last 2 years called Field Change. And we work with young people in that 16 to 25 range to do just exactly that. We run challenges where we present them with real world sustainability problems to solve, and then equip them with the skills to solve it, working in teams. We teach them about circular thinking, circularity and decarbonisation, the Walt Disney ideation process, equip them with the skills. And you take young people who at the beginning of this journey are disengaged. And by the end of this 16-week programme, they're engaged. And they're normally either apprentices in the workplace or they're students in college or university. We're also working now in about 50 or 60 secondary schools where this is on the curriculum for senior school students, where they can gain a qualification in sustainability. And it's to create the critical thinkers, the problem solvers with the practical skills who know enough about sustainability to evaluate their employer of the future and make the choices that will align with their values. So more young people are going to come forward as the workforce of the future, demanding more of the business community. So if the SME community wants to attract the best talent, they've got to have the best strategy to attract that talent. And one of the ways that they can do that is going in and working alongside schools, helping embed sustainability at the heart of the schools themselves, which sit at the heart of the communities, creating the social value that's needed, which wins them more work because they're measured on that. But the key thing is they can drive the change that's needed if they tackle it from the grassroots. So I absolutely recommend businesses carve out time in their budget and in their resources to make sure they're fully engaging the future generations in this. Businesses don't need to do this by their own. There's hidden genius in the next generation. Tap into that.
Yeah, I so agree with you. I've been having this conversation and seeing it work in businesses where they do engage with the schools and the colleges, and they're attracting talent by doing that. And people don't know what businesses are in their local. Like sometimes I think, which businesses are around me? You don't realise until you start going out there and speaking to people. What's next for Net Zero Nation? What's your plans?
So if you think so, we founded it to maximise impact. So there's no shareholder wealth going to be created from this. This is about stakeholder wealth for us. It's maximising impact to create a better future for everybody. So this year we'll run probably 10 accelerator programmes around Scotland. We started to do look at 1 or 2 down in the south and in the north of England as well. So we're seeking out partners and communities who want to mobilise those businesses on their journey. So if people are out there and they're motivated to take a systemic approach that connects our education system and our future generations, and businesses who want to work together on a shared journey, then get in touch. And if I can't help you directly, I'll put you in touch with someone who can.
Yeah, that's amazing, and good luck to you. And I think the work that you're doing is amazing, and to be able to support SMEs in that way, give them somewhere that they can go to, because it can be complex and it can be confusing. And I'm delighted that I'm going to be able to share this conversation, because everybody needs all the help they can get, and we just need to keep talking about it, keep engaging people, and help people on their journey. So thank you, Gavin. It's been a real pleasure to speak.
You're welcome. Good to speak to you, Sam. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
You too.